how my egregore got me admitted into Harvard. This story happened a long time ago, and it took many years to unfold. Much of what happened, I wasn't able to make the connection until I become proficient in Black Magick, so please excuse this story if it was bit jagged. Also, I am not here to flex my credential or tell you how smart I am, and this is definitely not a college admission tutorial. I just want to share with you how a person can use Black Magick to achieve miracles in their life. The last year of my high school was a disaster. I had some problems with my family, and being an independent thinker, I had problems following the rules. My grades were way below the pass-fail line. It wasn't the way I had originally envisioned how my high school years would end. There was a time I was hitting child genius grades. When I was in my 10th grade, I remember receiving an exam grade of 96%, rather than celebrating the highest score in class. I was upset for getting 2 questions wrong. On the last day of high school, I felt like I was a shadow of my former self. Luckily, at the time, the education system was set up that only the 6 best grades from a senior level course counted towards admission. I took a lot senior classes back when I was a sophomore, and those grades were stellar, so I got into a good college. Having said that, no child genius ever dream of going to a quote-unquote good college. A child genius aspires for the Ivy League. At the time, there was so much going on, that the idea of going to Harvard was a pipe dream, something I would do when I win the lottery. I was 18 years old at the time. Back at the time, I didn't have any exposure to Black Magick, let alone on how to create egregores. Remember, the early days of the internet was nothing like it is today. Google was not incorporated back then, no YouTube or even Wikipedia. I remember there was an option in Netscape where you can disable the browser from loading pictures, that way the page would load faster. Man, I am old. At this point I should briefly explain what it means to have an egregore. It is sometimes known as a servitor, or a tulpa, or a thought form entity. It is a spirit where the magician created to fulfill his wishes. The spirit have a mind of its own. It exists in the astral space. It uses astral energy. The purpose of the egregore was to fulfill its creator's wishes. There were books written on the subject, so I won't get into details in this story. At the time I didn't know any of that Black Magick stuff. Having said that, the most influential Disney movie in the 1990s was Aladdin, and who wouldn't want a genie coming out of a bottle to grant him 3 wishes? I knew about the genies and wish-granting spirits before I watched the cartoon, but for some reason, at that time I felt compelled to explore the concept of wish fulfillment. Keep in mind, that was before the movie The Secret. It was before the law of attraction was even a thing. It was before the word manifestation became popularized in American lexicon. The best I could do at the time was to fantasize about genies. At the same time, a new upscale gym opened near where I live. I was able to enjoy the facilities using my university's student card. The best part about a fancy gym is not the quality of its equipment, nor its convenient schedule of group exercise classes. The best part about this gym is its brand new sauna and steam room, a location where I would find myself spending the majority of my time in lieu of actually working out. One day, while I was deep in meditation in the steam room, an idea came to me. What if the genie was not an external being? What if the changes that happened in Ali's life was a result of his mind bending the time-space, and the genie was just a figment of his imagination? Is it possible that the genie was really a part of Ali, and it was Ali's mind that granted his wishes? Just to be clear, I was referring to the events in the movie Aladdin. So I was thinking, to that end, what if it was within the power of a human mind to create genies? What can I do to create my own genie that would grant me my 3 wishes? I should add, at this point of the story, that I was very familiar with parapsychology and psychic power development. It was one of my obsession back in high school. I even did a science fair project on parapsychology to which I received a national award, so bending reality by using willpower was a familiar subject. Although I had no exposure to the ideas of Western ceremonial magic back then. Once I got the idea that I can create my own genie, I got to put that to test. I remember I was alone in the steam room, and a fresh puff of steam just got blown into the air, and so I pushed all my mental energy out into that puff of smoke. At the same time, I was also pushing my intention to create a wish-granting genie, which is a part of myself but also a separate entity of myself, and to give it a push in physical form, I blow my breath into that puff of concentrated steam. That cloud of steam, I remember, was shaped into something of a humanoid form. Still in my psychic mental state, I said, "My genie, here are my 3 wishes." I had to pause to think for a moment. Remember, it was more like a thought experiment at that moment, so I wasn't quite taking it seriously. Being 18 at a time, and fresh graduate from an all-boys Catholic school. There was that obligatory first wish. I said to my genie. First, I wish for girls. I want to be surrounded by beautiful women. Second wish, I wish for money, that I will always have more money than I need. Women and money goes together, right? So what should I wish for the third wish? I gave it a moment and said to my genie. Third wish, I wish I get into Harvard, all expenses paid. I remember at the time, I can see the steam moving, changed shape, and I remember hearing a voice that said I got this. It might have been my overactive imagination, forcing a voice onto my genie, but I felt a sense of assurance after I heard that voice. For those of you who had enjoyed my occult black magic stories before knows what happened next. And just like that, poof, nothing happened. Women and money didn't fall from the sky, and I wasn't stepping out of the steam room right onto Harvard Yard. It was as if that steam room never happened. I wasn't discouraged, it was a fun mental experiment. The next few months, I would frequent the steam room with the same mental exercises. I guess in the Black Magic lexicon, we can call it a ritual. Each time I performed that ritual, I would try a different variation of summoning, or change the details of my wish, or try different breathing or energy technique. Still nothing happened. I just carry on with my life as a teenage boy. Now I don't want to bore you with every nauseating details of my teenage life. I can tell you my college life was not going so well. I was intellectually curious, but I wasn't pulling in the grades. That college had a reputation as a commuter's school, where students live their life out of campus and very few people live in resident halls. One of the things I did in that time frame was creating a holistic health business. It was shaping up to be one of those stories where a young entrepreneur would drop out of college to found a world-changing company. Business was booming. As a professional holistic health practitioner, it was important to build my reputation among my peers. There is a very important practitioner conference every year, near Boston. I was deciding whether or not I should go to that conference, but one night I dreamt I was walking under a bridge, just walking along casually on a Sunday afternoon. It became a recurring dream, where I would remember every step and every stone and every corner of that part of the bridge. I can't remember how I got to this conclusion, but I recognize that bridge as the bridge near Harvard Yard. I have never visited Harvard's campus before, and I have never seen that bridge in the picture, but once I came to conclusion that it was part of the Harvard campus, every travel arrangements I made for that conference just happened to fall into place. While at the conference, I shook some hands, met some good people, and turns out there was a lot of Harvard alumni at the conference. Big surprise, right? Seeing the hotel was in Boston. Talking to these Harvard people, I got a better idea on what it takes to get into Harvard. The Harvard alumni I met were brilliant people, but the impression I got was, they were not Superman, that I was able to hang in there with the best of them. At the time, my college grades was terrible, but I did have an excellent reputation as a holistic health practitioner. Turns out, at the time, Harvard Medical School was very keen on doing research on a subject I lectured at the conference. I was able to get in touch with those professors, who were very interested in my expertise, and along with my industry connection, I was able to transfer to Harvard as a special interest to the university. My grades were never discussed. Every academic failures I experienced up to that point was absolutely irrelevant. They just wanted to know when I could start. It was a surreal moment when I sat in my first class in Emerson Hall. I was just sitting in the back of the room, 30 minutes before class began, watching students and the teaching staff funneling into the lecture hall. It was as if I had quantum jumped dimension and now living in a completely different universe. Looking back into that first summoning of my egregore genie, it did feel like stepping out of the steam room onto Harvard Yard. It just took a few years to manifest. Later that week, I took a walk to Charles River, a public park next to the Kennedy School of Government. In front of my eyes was that bridge that connects Cambridge to Alston. It was a familiar sight, even though it was the first time I visited that park. I walked down the stairs to the base of that bridge, and every step and every stone and every crack I recognized from my recurring dream. Looking back, knowing what I know about black magic these days, I realized I had accidentally created an egregore, a thought form spirit that went into astral space to facilitate my wish. My intention was so strong at the time, along with my earlier practice in psychic power development, that I pushed a part of myself out to become this separate spiritual entity. I just happened to call it my genie at the time. For those of you who enjoyed my stories on this channel, you must be wondering when the moment comes where the spirit taps me on my shoulder and say, "How you like me now?" That moment didn't come until I became proficient with Western ceremonial magic, many, many years later, when I was able to connect the dots and realize what must have happened. Even though at the time I reckon it was something magical. Talking to my spirit guide these days, she said I did indeed created an egregore, but there were a few other spirits involved to made everything happen the way it did. My egregore did act as an astral butler in a way, inviting higher level spirits to help and smoothing out my rough edges, making sure I was ready when the opportunity presents itself. I asked my spirit guide if it would always take a few years to manifest something big. She said something really profound. She said I would never know since I never applied to Harvard right out of high school. I guess she was right. I did kind of gave up at the time, and no spirit can help you if you don't believe in yourself. As for my other wishes, I guess I will make separate videos for them. I can tell you, for my first wish, which was a wish for being surrounded by beautiful women, when I came to town I had to share a house with 5 other college-aged girls. It felt like a part of the 3-wish package I made in the steam room. I tell ya, it wasn't easy living with girls. Later on in my college life I had the opportunity of working with a lot of fashion models. If you know me in real life you will think I live a lifestyle of Hugh Hefner. I won't bore you with the details with my adventures with the opposite sex. Unless you really want to know, in that case, please leave a comment and tell me you want to learn more about attracting women with black magic. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. As for my second wish for money, I was able to pay for my education adventure with the income I generated with my business. Every Harvard student gets some form of need-blind scholarship, so it was never an issue. It wasn't cheap. Most of the expenses comes with living in a new city and relocating my business. I had to struggle financially just like every young person in America, but in all honesty, I never feel a lack of money. I always have more money than I need. Even when I didn't think I have enough money to do the things I want to do, money usually shows up to fulfill my needs, or I would find a way to achieve my goals without using money. So it wasn't like the movies. Things didn't just show up instantly out of thin air. I still had to exert a lot of energy and effort in the process of manifestation, but everything I wished for in that steam room came true. So, what can we take away from this story? First, manifestation takes time. A lot of times we did the ritual and seemingly nothing happened, but things are happening. You just need to keep working towards your goal. Just because it doesn't happen like the movie doesn't mean it isn't going to happen. Second, when you make a wish, push your limits, wish for a miracle. If you wish for a miracle, it will get the spirits excited, and they will more likely to help you. A lot of times people make their wish for the most mundane outcome. The spirits became bored and less motivated to help. Third, black magic favors the ease of heart. Looking back, the best thing I could have done in that steam room summoning was being playful. If you are too tense and obsesses with a certain outcome, you are not vibrating with the astral resonance. Another note to walk away is this: know that your wish will come true, but it may not happen the way you want it happen. Most people are obsessed with things happening a certain way, and when it doesn't happen the way they want, they became emotionally upset and gave up. Or spend their energy forcing manifestation by a certain means, but lost sight of the big picture. If I were obsessed with improving my grades or finding ways to pay for tuition, I would have missed this opportunity, and turns out neither grades nor money would have made a difference in this scenario. Also, when it comes to wishes, don't worry about the money. A lot of people hesitate to make big wishes because they fear they can't afford the outcome. Have faith that the resources will be available when you are ready. The spirit will always bring you the ideas, people and opportunities you need to fulfill your wishes. Get yourself ready to take advantage of said opportunities, because such time will definitely come. Did you have any success working with egregores? What was the most outrageous thing you've manifested through black magic or law of attraction? Please share your story in the comment section below. I have a lot more stories to share when it comes to working with spirits. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to receive the latest updates.